right, 6 minutes after 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. Most of you who are familiar with how Robin and I do the show know that when we speak to novelists, we typically keep the interviews short. But when I read the information for our next guest, I thought, you know what, I'd like this to be a little bit longer because I am always fascinated with true stories. Even though this is a novel, it sounds like it's based on real-life experiences during, I think it was 1943, June of 1943, I think, if I remember right. And don't ask me why, because I don't know that I can even explain it, but I have some kind of a fascination. Maybe I'm reincarnated, I don't know. But I have some kind of a fascination with the World War II era. I've always had, I don't know if it's the music of the era or something about it. I don't know what it is. I mean, I'm not fascinated with the war itself. Obviously, who would, I guess a warmonger would be, but
yeah.
I think it's the culture or what was going on in the era. I'm not really sure. And times weren't even good, so it's not like I'm in love with a time that looks like it was a better time than what I'm going through. I think I'm going through a pretty good time, but there's something about it, and that's why I love what we're going to talk about. Evelyn Eileen Smith is on the phone. She goes by the pen name of her initials, E.E. Smith. She's been with us before. Today she's talking about a book that's a little different than the other ones, though. Boardinghouse Stew is the name of this novel. It is based on her own story during World War II, and E.E. Smith has a lot of credentials and a lot of awards, so it's an honor always, just a pleasure to say good morning to her, and I think she's out on the West Coast. Good morning, Evelyn. How are you?
Well, I was just saying to Robin, we're all sick with the flu out here, but I think so far I'm surviving.
Where are you?
Well, I live actually a few miles south of Santa Rosa. It's in Northern California in Sonoma County.
Okay.
We make wine out here. That's the big thing around here.
And wine is good for you. We just had this whole piece that wine is good for you.
I hope so.
Well, I hope the flu is not bringing you down too much. You sound pretty good.
I think I'm all right. You just never know. You take a lot of aspirin and you just hope for the best.
You sleep and then you don't write until you're all done with it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So do you write every day?
Not really. I don't write on any kind of a schedule. I'm not one of these writers who has a certain set number of words to write in a day. I sometimes don't write at all for several days, and then all of a sudden I'm fired up, and I will write for quite a long time. And so I don't write from an outline. I have it all in my head. And that's the way it goes.
That's how you do it. So, in the past, I'm guessing that even when something is completely fictional, you're still drawing from real life experiences. But in this case, it's kind of more defined that it does come from real life experiences. So, as we read Boardinghouse Stew, are you the narrator?
Yes.
You are the narrator, okay.
There is a little girl, 11-year-old girl, who says she's going on 13 in order to get the job for the summer. She is the narrator, and there are 6 boarders and 3 boys and 3 girls, and a very lazy and nosy proprietress, Mrs. Mumson. And so those are the basically the characters, plus this little girl who is myself at that age.
Did you keep a diary at that time? Did you write it? Did you keep a journal?
No, I didn't actually keep a journal. I was too busy to do that. I had too many other things to do. But I do seem to have a remarkable memory. I can remember people's faces as they say things, and that all kind of goes into the book. So I have it all in my head. I don't know how any other way to explain it. And what I can't remember, there are certain details that I probably have forgotten. So I kind of fill in a little bit. That's why I say it's a fictionalized account.
Yeah. That's what I wondered.
An actual experience.
Okay, and as a skilled writer, you also had to make it entertaining for us as readers. So you probably
Yes, because a lot of people didn't live during the war and don't know it firsthand the way I do and did.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to fill that background in too.
So you were on the West Coast at that time, just as you are now.
Yeah,
you were
Sacramento,
in Sacramento, okay.
California, which is only about 100 miles from here, actually.
And this was obviously Japan was our enemy, and there were Japanese people living in California that were the labor force. Is that right?
Well, a lot of them, yes. And in this story, there was a young houseboy, a Japanese houseboy and gardener, and he was taken. You may remember that they were evacuating all the Japanese and Japanese Americans, regardless of citizenship. They were evacuated to camps that were outside of what they called the war zone, or the vulnerable places where they might be in a position to help the Japanese. Of course, there were never any incidents like that.
Yeah.
And even in Hawaii, where there was a great population of Japanese, there was never any incidents of their trying to help the Japanese, and they were not evacuated. So.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain why that happened here.
But whether you agreed with the decision to evacuate them or not, it still happened, and that's how a young girl, meaning you, was able to get a job at such a young age.
That's true, and it was only a job for the summer. I didn't work there except for we had a 4 months vacation that year. Because they wanted to recruit school kids to pick the tomatoes in the fields, which were rotting for lack of pickers with the Japanese gone. But I had done that the year before, and it was terribly hot and terribly hard work in the Sacramento Valley. So I got this job in the boarding house, and it was better than being outside in the sun.
And what was your job? What were you required to do?
I did everything. I was hired as a maid, but then Mrs. Mumson, who was the proprietress, discovered that I could cook, and so she made me the cook. I also had to do the shopping.
My goodness! And you were 11 years old.
I was 11 years old.
Wow.
But I told her I was going on 13. That just seemed to be a better number.
Yeah, true.
So what was your...
And I was tall for my age.
So what was your story in your own family? How come you had to work at 11?
I didn't, actually, but everybody went to work in the summers during the war. Everybody from, all the school kids went to work. Because there was such a labor shortage created not only by the Japanese removal, but by the people going off to the war plants. In Sacramento, there was they were building ships and airplanes, and everyone was flocking to the factories for better jobs, better paying jobs.
So
that left Mrs. Mumson without the help of the maid and cook in the house. Plus, the Japanese boy was gone, and so she was left with no one. But what was going on in my own family is that my mother and father were divorced, and I lived with my mother and my older sister in a house not too far away. But I got to staying at the boarding house because I was up very early and staying up very late at night.
Oh, wow. You must have some fabulous memories. Well, now that we've kind of set it up for the audience, I want to make sure that they hear I want to be fair to the book, but I'm just so fascinated by your story, and I'm not even sure why I'm fascinated, but I am. So
a lot of people, you're not alone in that. A lot of people are now getting back into World War II, and it has been called the last good war, if you can call war good.
Yeah.
Because it was just a different time. Everyone was, of course, shocked and outraged by the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, which is how we got into the war. And so everyone pulled together. It was a great patriotic time, and it's much different today with wars.
Evelyn, we need to take a little break, and we'll be right back, and then we'll continue this. This is The Source, WOCA Ocala.
The weather is brought to you by MyFWC.com. Safe boating is no accident.
Some fog patches this morning, otherwise it'll be mostly cloudy, warm and rather humid today with a couple of showers and a thunderstorm from late morning on, the high 75 to 79. Mostly cloudy and mild tonight with a couple of showers and a thunderstorm, mainly early, low 59 to 63. Tomorrow, areas of fog in the morning, otherwise mostly cloudy with a high of 72 to 76. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm Joe Lundberg.
The LPGA Tour will kick off the 2015 season right here in Central Florida at the inaugural Coates Golf Championship presented by R&L Carriers, January 26th to the 31st at Golden Ocala Golf and Equestrian Club. Kids 12 and under get in free with a ticketed adult, so bring the entire family to see 120 of the world's best female golfers compete on a nationally televised stage. For information and tickets, visit CoachGolfChampionship.com.
You've got a garden and we've got a show for you called You've Got a Garden with your host, Master Gardener Carol Ann Baldwin. Carol Ann answers your questions about your flowers, your veggies, your grass, your trees, even questions about your bugs. And she's only on WOCA, so don't miss Carol Ann Baldwin and You've Got a Garden each Tuesday from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on WOCA The Source.
Get it for less at the DIY Home Center outlet. Get top quality real wood cabinets the same or less than the big box stores are selling the cheap stuff. And that's not all. Drywall screws big box stores are $6.47 a pound. At DIY, only $4.99. Plus, DIY has the largest selection of mobile home parts and accessories anywhere. From carpet to doors, get the DIY supplies you need for less. The DIY Home Center outlet. We are your building material closeout store. 2191 Northwest 10th Street, just 2 miles east of I-75.
All right, 18 minutes after 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. Boy, time flies when you're speaking to a guest that is, that you connect with, I guess. Evelyn Eileen Smith is on the phone. Her book is called Boardinghouse Stew, and it's a novel, but it's based on her real experiences in Sacramento, California, in 1943. Am I remembering right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And Evelyn, did I hear you tell Robin this is a play also?
It was a play. It began as a play 25 years ago. And it has been around various places, produced in various places, and but not recently. I was just telling Robin that it was done 15 years ago in Oklahoma City, and then they did it again 3 years ago. Because it had been a popular play, and it was brought back, I guess, by popular demand.
So who was in the boarding house? Who were the people that lived there? How many people? And who is Mrs. Mumson? Is she like the head person?
She owns the house.
She owns the house.
And she was a widow. In those days, widows, if they weren't left a huge legacy, and she wasn't, had to turn their big houses into boarding houses, and so that they could rent out rooms and make some money from it. Otherwise, they couldn't keep the houses. So that's how she ended up doing that. And then the other characters were the 6 boarders. They lived there, they slept there, and they ate there 2 meals a day. And there were 6 of those. 3 of them were girls, 3 of them were boys. And she was very strict about the rules in the house. No fraternizing between the girls and boys.
How old were they? How old were the other
Well, they were all young people, as I remember. I don't think any of them was over maybe 25.
So she had a rule, but did they break the rule? Was there fraternizing going on?
Well, if you read the book, you'll see that there was.
I know, but I want you to tell me. I want the audience to know.
I don't want to be a.
You don't want to spoil it?
Call it spoiler alert.
I don't think that would spoil it, though.
There was some fraternizing,
okay.
And it was a great shock to Mrs. Mumson when this comes out, and that's one of the tragedies. It has both comic and tragic elements in it, and that was one of the tragedies.
And we were talking about dialogue during the break. You really are an expert at that. It is most wonderfully done, and it is funny. There was that one course of dialogue about someone, you don't have to be Rita Hayworth to be a real woman. I thought that was pretty good.
Well, I hope a lot of people know who Rita Hayworth was. And a lot of the references in the book are to people movie stars and so forth who were around in that time and have probably largely been forgotten today. But enough older people, I think, will have some connection, at least, with the memories of war and those war years. And you were talking earlier about music. That was, I think, the swing era, I think, was one of the best eras for music that we've had in this country. So that
it's a lot of good stuff. Evelyn, why did you refer to Mrs. Mumpson as nosy?
Nosy?
Yeah.
Because, as I say in the book, she takes an interest in her boarders' lives, and whether that was well-meaning or whether she was just nosy, but she was a very kind person, and she did take everything to heart that happened in the boarding house. So she had her faults, but she was basically a kind person, and she just wanted to know everything about everybody.
How did, I know this might not be part of the book, but how did that experience influence the rest of your life? How long were you there?
Well, that was just the summer of 43, and as I said, we had 4 months vacation that year, so that the school kids could be recruited to work in the fields, picking the crops. So she was delighted to have me for 4 months. So it began early in June and ended when we went back to school in the fall.
And did those experiences influence you later on in life? I mean, obviously, it must have impressed you enough to write about it.
Yeah.
So
well, that's true. At the age of 11, they say it's a very formative age, and I think that's in my case it certainly was. And I was very close to some of the people in the boarding house who were not much older than I was, 10 or 15 years. And I was very much attached to one of them whose name was Teddy Soberjowski, and that is his real name. And I've always hoped that I would somehow, either the play or the book, would turn up Teddy Soberjowski somewhere, but so far I haven't been able to find him.
Is he on Facebook? How old would he be now?
Well, if he was 10 or 15 years older than I am, let me see, that would be pretty old.
The title you have is very, very appropriate because it doesn't necessarily mean food. It just means the coming together of a lot of different people in one place.
It does, but it also refers to that old adage, I don't know whether you've heard it, maybe it's too old for you, called "Times like these are about as unpredictable as boarding house stew." In other words, it means anything can happen. You can put anything in a boarding house stew, and that's so it's kind of a play on words because it is a book about how this little girl becomes a cook and how she dreams up some of the weirdest recipes in the world. And so it's boarding house stew that refers to several different aspects of the book.
Yeah, and the people themselves were the stew, or the ingredients of the stew.
That's true, yes, on that level as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you do when you weren't working there? You were still there. Did you? There was nobody else your age though. So did the others kind of embrace you as if you were their age?
Yes. Oh yes, they thought that I was just wonderful, and they kind of. Actually, we all kind of pulled together and became a kind of family. In fact, I got sick in halfway through the book, and they all rallied around and took over a lot of my duties so that I wouldn't have to work so hard. They were all just really swell to me and treated me like a little sister, actually. So when I stayed there at night, we listened to the radio programs at night, and in the morning I would get up and I would make breakfast for everybody and then have dinner for them when they came home from work.
Because of the horrendousness that was going on in the world at that time, it seems like the younger people were more mature than their age. You are a great example of that.
I think wartime, especially when the whole nation gets into it the way they did during World War II, I think everybody matures earlier, and you just have to. Kids going into the Army and Navy were 18. Sometimes they were 17, and that will mature a person.
Yes.
I would think very quickly.
Wow, well, you are a pretty lady. Your mother is a pretty lady. Your sister is a pretty lady. I'm looking at the pictures in the book. You have a lot of pretty in your family. How do you spell Teddy's last name?
It's Soberjowski.
Yeah.
It's like sober, SOBER, JOWSKI.
JOWSKI. Okay. I'm going to look it up for you while you're talking to a listener. We have a listener calling in. Our guest is Evelyn Eileen Smith, and her book is called Boardinghouse Stew. Good morning. Thank you for calling. You're on the air with Evelyn.
Good morning, Evelyn. Do you remember the rationing cards, stamps, and the little red dots? They were called mills. And I was just wondering how that worked out as your job as cook at that time. I know we had it on the East Coast. I'll hang up and listen. Thank you again.
All right, thank you. Good question. Yeah. Evelyn?
I didn't hear that. Can you give me an idea what it was?
He was asking about the rations.
Yes, the ration cards.
Ration of food.
Yeah,
yes.
Did that affect what you were able to do? The caller said on the East Coast it affected everything. Did it affect you guys on the West Coast?
Absolutely, and especially in a house where you're feeding altogether 8 people. You had ration books for everybody. I had to keep track of all the blue stamps and the red stamps and the green stamps, and you couldn't buy anything, meat and that sort of thing, unless you paid the proper amount of points, ration stamps for it, and unless you bought on the black market. And of course, everybody was against that. That was very not only illegal but unpatriotic. So you didn't buy on the black market. But you didn't have a lot of meat either. That all went to feed our armed forces.
Yeah.
So we were, as citizens, were rationed for what we could buy in the way of canned goods and butter and sugar, milk, and other things too, like shoes and tires were also rationed. A lot of people don't realize, especially people in other countries, don't realize that we had all that rationing. They think we had it pretty good over here, while Europe especially was very deprived of a lot of things. So people who've read the book over in England are very surprised that we had rationing here, but it was a great factor for me because I had to count up everybody's points and make sure that everybody had good food to eat, and that's how I came up with some of these crazy recipes.
Wow.
I love that.
What an enjoyable conversation. Evelyn, thank you so much for being on the air. By the way, I looked up Teddy's name, and your name comes up. So I think the only place in the whole internet where his name exists is when you've mentioned him. Boardinghouse Stew is the book. The website, I guess you can get it on Amazon. How else do you get it?
This edition, this new one that's just come out, is only an ebook. Unfortunately, I don't care for that, but the other one is out of print, and so they've made it an ebook, and it's on Amazon.com. It's also on Barnes & Noble.
All right,
That's
excellent.
the other place you can get it.
Evelyn Eileen Smith goes by E.E. Smith if you're looking her up that way. Boardinghouse Stew, delightful book, delightful lady. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day, even with the flu, to talk to us today, Evelyn.
Well, I'm just delighted to have a conversation with you again.
It was very good. All right, we will take a little break. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Dr. Erica Olstein with A Better You Healthcare Acupuncture and Eastern Medicine. As primary care physicians, we use acupuncture to treat back pain, arthritis, migraines, allergies, high blood pressure, thyroid disorders, hormone imbalances, stress, and more using all natural medical therapy.